We got UFC Fight Night in Las Vegas. Elijah Smith from USA versus Toshiomi Kazama from Japan. Elijah Smith is 8-1, 5'9", 22 years old, a young 22 years old, and 71-inch reach. Toshiomi Kazama from Japan is 5'7", 11-4, 28 years old, and a 69-inch reach. Elijah Smith is 1-0 in the G League with a decision win over Aaron Taiu. Now, I don't usually hold G League wins in high regard, and I still don't hold this in very high regard, but he did beat a New Zealand fighter with a crazy face tattoo whose only loss did come to Elijah Smith. So now there, you got to hold that in you got to hold that with some decency. In the UFC, he's 1-0. He had a decision win over Vince Morales, and the odds were -115 in that fight, and he barely beat him. It was a very even fight. He still won. But Vince Morales is 0-3 in the UFC, and it shows the level Elijah Smith is at. He's okay, but his win over Vince Morales honestly wasn't that impressive. It was a very even fight. It just shows Elijah Smith is at the level of Vince Morales, who had heart but isn't the best. Elijah Smith at 800, at -800 is a dangerous price, just considering the fact that Elijah Smith is still a very young prospect, and he hasn't proven much. He's definitely not the best UFC fighter and is still a low-level UFC fighter. But at the same time, he's still very young to be at the UFC. And at 22, winning at that age in the UFC against anyone is very, very impressive. And he's only bound to improve at such a young age. Now his opponent, Toshiomi Kazama from Japan. Toshiomi Kazama from Japan is 1-2 in the UFC. He has 2 first-round knockout losses. One to Urinya Nakamura and the other to Garrett Armfield. He has a second-round submission win over Charlampos Jiguardaro, who I've never heard of. He's a UFC scrub. So he did beat a UFC scrub, which shows he can beat UFC competition, but he's still a very low-level fighter. This fight is hard to get a read on, honestly. Elijah Smith should win, as he's the young prospect who's on a winning track against a random Japanese fighter. But right here, it's still hot. This random Japanese fighter probably knows he's going to get cut with a loss to this low-ranking prospect. This is going to be an interesting fight, as the Japanese fighter is most likely going to be fighting for his life. He got finished by a good, strong fighter in Rinya Nakamura and a strong, decent fighter in Garrett Armfield, but Elijah Smith has never finished anyone in the UFC. But Toshiomi Kazama could be an easy target if Elijah is interested in finding finishes in the UFC, and you know that's what the UFC wants. UFC wants fighters to finish. So Toshiomi Kazama is an easy mark if Elijah's interested in finding the finish, and you know that's what the UFC wants him to do. It's going to be interesting to see how Toshiomi Kazama responds, knowing his back is against the wall. Elijah Smith is the pick here, and he's shown he's on the winning track, and Toshiomi Kazama has looked very weak at times, but -800 on a low-level UFC prospect is kind of crazy. Elijah Smith is the pick here over Kazama, but -800 on a low-level UFC prospect is forcing it. And Toshiomi Kazama could pull some shit out of his ass here with his back against the wall against this low-level UFC prospect. It wouldn't be the craziest thing if Toshiomi Kazama finessed the win, but in all likely the odds reflect what should happen. Elijah Smith is on a winning track. He's a young 22-year-old prospect, and they want him to keep winning. And Elijah Smith should take home the W here. Elijah Smith versus Toshiomi Kazama. Elijah Smith money line. But Toshiomi Kazama is live. Elijah Smith isn't the best prospect in the world. He's 1-0 in the UFC with decision win over someone who's 0-3, and it was a very comp fight. So it shows where he's at. He should win this fight. It's just hot at -800. Isn't a good price for him, but at the same time, he still should win. Elijah Smith over Toshiomi Kazama.